Welcome, everyone. If you can find a seat, we're going to begin. Very excited to see all of you here at SAJ, as well as all of the folks online.
Lisa,
Yes.
do we have to speak with the mask?
Yeah. Well, we're far enough apart.
Very far apart.
We're far enough apart.
It will be better for...
Yeah. You guys okay in the front if I take the mask off?
You will hear better.
I'm not singing. Is this better? Can you hear me better? Okay. So welcome, everyone, both at SAJ and online. I am Cantor Lisa Arbisser, the cantor here at SAJ-Judaism, that stands for all. Very excited to have our special guests here and you folks here in the sanctuary to participate in our 100th anniversary kickoff weekend. We had an amazing service. Beautiful celebratory Shabbat service yesterday, and the celebration continues today with really honoring our musical tradition and our musical heritage here at SAJ, focusing on the first 50 years and the Gedolim who really helped build this house of worship and prayer, and very excited to learn about these really important people and share it with all of you. This program was sort of a long time coming. We originally tried to do it, October 2020 was when we were trying to sort of predate the 100th anniversary, and then COVID happened. And so now we are here today, and I just want to also honor the memory of Dan Cedarbaum, who really came up with the idea for this program. It was really going to focus only on Cantor Moshe Nathanson, and we said now that we have this timing within the 100th that we'll expand it to some other important folks. And so I really want to just honor his memory and his real commitment to Kaplan and bringing knowledge of Kaplan and Kaplan's legacy to the world as well as to SAJ, and really his enthusiasm for this institution and everything that Kaplan sort of contributed to American Judaism. So today we're going to hear about 5 important folks in SAJ's history: Abraham Tzvi Edelson, Moshe Nathanson, Chemio Vinever, Tzipora Yaxberger, and Judith Kaplan Eisenstein. So they encompass roughly the first 5 decades of SAJ's musical heritage, and we're going to have other opportunities throughout this celebratory year to learn more about the musical history, bring in some former cantors, and so hopefully some more live music, other than my 2 little songs at the end that you'll hear today. We're going to have Dr. Edwin Serrusi here with us to speak about several of these people, as well as Paula Eisenstein Baker on zooming in from Houston to share her knowledge as well as on a few of them. So a little bit about both of these amazing scholars. So Edwin Dr. Serrusi is the Emmanuel Alexander Professor of Musicology at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and director of the Jewish Music Research Center since 2000, as well as a visiting scholar at Dartmouth College since 2007. He was previously a teacher in the Department of Music at Bar Ilan University and has been a visiting professor at several institutions of higher learning in Europe and North and Latin Americas. He was born in Uruguay, and Professor Serrusi immigrated to Israel in 1971, where he studied at the Department of Musicology at the undergraduate and graduate levels, continuing for his doctoral studies at UCLA in the mid-'80s. He's a faculty member of the Department of Musicology at the Hebrew University, where he teaches ethnomusicology, world music, theory, and methodology in the study of oral traditions and popular music. His research focuses on the musical cultures of the Mediterranean and the Middle East, interactions between Jewish and Islamic cultures, and popular music in Israel, exploring the process of hybridization, diaspora, nationalism, and transnationalism. He founded the Yuval Music Series and is editor of the acclaimed CD series Anthology of Music Traditions in Israel. Beside his academic activities, he's active in the music scene of Israel and abroad in diverse capacities as a producer, advisor, member of the board of musical institutions, and is representative to the International Music Council. He's been awarded several prestigious prizes, among them the Israel Prize in the field of musicology for 2018. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Serrusi. Dr. Eisenstein Baker, Paula Eisenstein Baker, is instructor emerita of violoncello and chamber music at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. She's written extensively about early 20th century Society for Jewish Folk Music, and she co-edited the Robert S. Nelson 2 volumes of the works of composer Leo Zeitlin, Leo Zeitlin Chamber Music, and Leo Zeitlin Palestina, an overture for the Capitol Theater, New York. In 2016, she produced a concert in Houston of a selection of Leo Zeitlin's orchestral works conducted by Robert Linder, and CD is available if you'd like to hear that. Dr. Baker Eisenstein Baker's connection to SAJ is rather personal, in addition to her knowledge of Moshe Nathanson and Judith Kaplan Eisenstein. Her parents were Ruth and Myron. So Myron was Ira Eisenstein's brother. So that makes Paula Judith Kaplan Eisenstein's her niece. And her parents moved to this neighborhood around 1934, and they joined SAJ. And that was when Paula and Miriam Eisenstein, Judith and Ira's daughter, grew up together through middle school and a little bit of high school here at SAJ and in New York City until Judith's father got a job in Chicago and the family moved away. Paula has a younger sister and a younger brother, and we're going to hear a lot more, hopefully, about their family and their history and their connection to Judith Kaplan Eisenstein and SAJ. So now, without further ado, we'd love to hear from Dr. Serrusi about, I guess, Cantor Edelson first.
Yeah, we'll start, yeah. So if you allow me to start with my own thank you note.
Yes.
To you, Cantor Lisa, for the invitation, to Barbara for all what you have done to make this event possible, and to the Society for the Advancement of Judaism for allowing me the honor of being here on this joyous occasion. I want to also start by trying to focus this event within the framework of and I'm sorry if I sound a little bit academic, but just only one concept from academia. What is a musical community? And I think that the Society for the Advancement of Judaism is really, above all, or at least in the first 50 years, a musical community. That means a community who, a very important part of its life surrounded performance of music, teaching of music, innovation in music, and this is what makes the case unique. When I was invited by Dr. Siderbaum, Zichrono Livracha, and I want to dedicate my words to him. We just met in Chicago, and he said, Edwin, did you ever heard about Moshe Nathanson? I said, how can you be a scholar in Jewish music and never heard about Moshe Nathanson? And I told him that I published a little bit about him, mostly about his teacher, Avraham Tzvi Edelson, with whom we will open this event. And many years ago, I found a letter by Moshe Nathanson in Jerusalem, in the archive of Edelson, in which he writes to his teacher in Cincinnati, from New York, from here, from this building perhaps, to Cincinnati, a very extensive letter saying the most beautiful things about him. And that letter, it's very interesting for its psychological, I would say, background. In terms of, I hear in this letter some sort of apology to the teacher for something. And I won't go into my explanations for that. We will move straight into the first figure of Hiddleston. So in that conversation with Siderbaum, with Dr. Siderbaum, Alav Shalom, we thought of dedicating an entire event in the memory of Moshe Nathanson. I have a lot to say, and regretfully today I won't have the time to say all what I would like to say, so we will touch on him briefly. But meanwhile, with the collaboration of the cantor here and with Barbara, we started to realize that this community has a pedigree of musicians that is, in my opinion, one of the most impressive in American Judaism, particularly in those first 70 years or 50 to 70 years, but certainly it continues to this very day. So we decided to make this event on those first years simply because we don't have the time to cover everything. So just 2 words about Abraham Zvi Hiddleston. The way we will go, we will speak about these individuals one by one, more or less in a historical sequence, if I may say. And part of this conversation will be with Paula, because Paula is just a live witness of these people. So who am I that can speak when we have a live person who can tell us the story? Abraham Zvi Hiddleston, if you look online, the first thing you will find everywhere that he's the father of Jewish music. Well, he is the father of Jewish musicology, perhaps, certainly a towering figure, a major figure. And his story is very interesting. I won't tell it all because it's very complicated, but to make it very short, he was born in the Baltic countries, in the country of Latvia. He moved from there to study in Germany. This is a pattern that we'll see many Jewish musicians from Eastern Europe that at the beginning of the 20th century, they moved to Germany to study music at the best schools. And from there, they became cantors, composers, music teachers, etc. Hiddleston became a cantor. He was a cantor in Germany, then in South Africa. But then he did something that nobody at that time used to do. He moved to what was then Turkish Palestine, Eretz Israel. And he became the main ethnographer of Jewish music in the East, one of the first ones to use a recording machine to gather all these musical traditions. Eventually, Hiddleston, like many Eastern European musicians who tried to live in Palestine, in Eretz Israel, they came to America. He came to America, and his first contact, one of his first contacts was with Rabbi Kaplan in the autumn of 1922. And by the end of December 1922, he is the cantor of this congregation. Now, Hiddleston hasn't been a cantor for many years, and the fact that he accepted the job here from my point of view, and I'm also quoting here my colleague, Professor Judith Cohen from Indiana, who has written about Hiddleston and the SAJ. In a way, he used the SAJ as a springboard to enter into the American academic establishment. Eventually, he became the teacher of Jewish liturgy, the first professor of Jewish liturgy at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. So that's all for Hiddleston. And as I said before, for each of the musicians that we are going to remember tonight, we have a video clip that you can see in the screen. So we will run the video clip about Hiddleston. We won't say anything else because everything is in the clip. Just to save time, you will have the opportunity to read what you're listening to in the clip. And let's roll. let's
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
This one should actually be familiar to folks who've come to the high holidays here. I'm going to leave it like that.
And you saw that this recording, done almost 50 years ago, it's an historical recording of Cantor Malovani, which is sort of next door neighbor from here, and the choir directed by Tzipora Yoxberger, who we are going to hear more towards the second part of our program. Rabbi Kaplan saw in the renewal of Judaism one of his main goals, and artistic renewal was part of his agenda. And he expressed this idea in many of his writings, and this is why enhancing the musical experience or enhancing the spirit of the congregation through musical experience was so central for him and led to the recruitment of all these magnificent people. So Edelson leaves after 6 months of service here to go to become a professor in Cincinnati. He needs a replacement. He promised the community that he will have a replacement cantor. Cantor, do you heard about that story? And luckily enough, his student from Jerusalem, his student from high school in Jerusalem, okay, Moshe Nathanson, it's here in America. Nathanson at the beginning came to study law, and he was a student of law at McGill University, but he saw that that's not for him. He wanted to be a musician, composer, and he moved to Brooklyn, and Edelson obviously was in contact with him. He said, "Come, I have a job for you." And that's the I'm sorry, I'm simplifying the story. We have documentation from the archive of SAJ regarding all the negotiations and all the different stages in which this happened. But for the purposes of today, this is enough. Now, listen what's happening here. Nathanson is a native of Palestine, of Eretz Israel. He is a person of the issue. He brings with him to America, and also Edelson, but Edelson is a European who made a sojourn through Palestine. And Edelson is a real native. He's a real Palestinian. He brings to America the emerging Hebrew culture of Eretz Israel, the new thing going on in the Jewish world. And this is one of his major life contributions, the introduction of Hebrew song, of Hebrew language to American Judaism. And among his many publications that we won't name now, but one of them, I brought them with me. This is one of my favorite books of Jewish music, Manginot Shireinu, okay? You see, there is no English transliteration or translation. In English, it's also called Manginot Shireinu, the melodies of our songs. One of the most important songsters of Hebrew song of the 1930s, comparable with some materials that were published about the same time in Germany. And that's the history of Jewish music in the first 30 years of the 20th century are reflected in each song in the songster. So we will move on into two stages. First of all, before we hear the voice of Nathanson singing, we will hear an historical video clip of a party that happened here at SAJ in 1972 of 45 years, I think, no? 50 years. Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah, he references the...
Yeah, 50 years of Nathanson as a cantor, and he tells the story about Edelson, so we'll hear this in his voice. That's okay, we have a little clip, please.
I don't think people have to try too hard for me to be forgotten, because nature takes its course. When you're gone, you're forgotten. Well, my name is Moshe Nathanson, and I happen to be the cantor of this Society for Advancement of Judaism. How many years? This October, when they're going to celebrate its 50th anniversary, in the month of October of 1923, I substituted for my teacher, the great teacher Edelson, who went out for a lecture tour over America. I never saw this synagogue. I lived in Brooklyn. I was a student, and he asked me to come and substitute. And I did on October 1923. And in December, the beginning of December 1923, when the great Edelson was called to become professor in Cincinnati, in the Hebrew Union College, I was called and became the cantor here. So, in October will be 49 years. That means I missed it. I missed the foundation by 1 year. And why do I say it? I don't complain, God forbid. I'm very, very happy that I had been the cantor. And I'm very, very happy now that I'm retired. But if I didn't have my name in the mailing list of the SAJ, which I get the bulletin and all other things, I wouldn't have known that in October, this coming in a week, 2 weeks, they will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the SAJ. I'm glad that all the rabbis will be there, with whom I worked, and I want to take a little credit that they are, thank God, until 140 years, I don't say 120 because we live in an era of inflation, so I say 140. that they will all be here, from Dr. Kaplan down.
Edwin, if I
Yes,
could just, I want to say
please.
that if this event is being recorded and the videos that we are showing, well, all of it will be available on the YouTube channel very soon after this event. So if you want to go back and listen to these, because some of them are, audio quality is better than others. If you want to go back and listen to it again, they will all be up on the YouTube channel very soon.
Yeah, it is amazing. We have this recording, this historical recording, thanks to Dr. Siderman. He forwarded that to us. So you hear Nathanson with his sense of humor in a way that the man had. After 50 years, he said, I am Cantor, Nathanson was here for 50 years. It's a nice way to start the speech. And his heavy Hebrew Ashkenazi accent from Palestine that he never lost, obviously, in his English. We have Paula with us, and Paula, you are the living memory. You were a student of Nathanson. I would like you to share your recollections of being a bat mitzvah student with Nathanson. Just unmute.
Paula, you're still muted.
Rescue me.
How about now?
Now? Yes?
There you go. Good.
Okay. Well, it's to try to sum up studying with Moshe Nathanson. It's a tough job. One of the interesting things that I realized when I was thinking back over the experience was we never wrote down anything in musical notation. Everything was oral. And when I think about it, I realize that that's probably because he had so many bar and bat mitzvah trainees that he could not count on their all being literate musically. So he had to do everything orally. And he was just an extraordinary. When I was 12 years old, I had no appreciation for what an extraordinary person I was studying with. I had the chutzpah, for instance. He was off to a conference somewhere in upstate New York. And at the time, I was collecting pennants that I hung on the wall of the room that my sister and I shared. So I asked Moshe Nathanson if he would please bring me a pennant from Syracuse, New York. I mean, I look back on this with horror. He brought me a pennant. I hung it on the wall. And it's embarrassing to admit that I would have asked him for something so trivial. But he was absolutely extraordinary to study with. I mean, it was, I guess I was a good student. And so every couple of weeks, he would add something else that I could do during the service. And it just, it kind of expanded and expanded. I did read the entire portion. I had Bereshit, and I read for all the aliyot. And I can still begin, I can still begin the Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'haaretz hayata tohu vavohu v'choshech al penei tehom v'ruach Elohim. I think breaks off at about there. I stop remembering it. But I can't believe that this is sort of still stuck in my brain. In addition to all the other things that that we studied with him, that we learned. I had no, you don't, when you're 12 years old, you don't understand what kind of privileges you're having.
Paula, you mentioned to me a special piece that Nathanson composed for the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvahs here at SAJ.
The one that he got me to use at the very end of the service?
Yes.
Okay. It turned out that I actually had, over the years, I had collected a copy of all three volumes of Zamru Lo. And this was an example of his escalating on me as I was training. This was something I did not, yeah. Yes, you got, mine is brown, yours is purple. I think because I was eager to learn and I enjoyed studying with him so much that he just sort of kept adding things that I could do. And at one point he said, well, you know what, there was at the SAJ, I don't know whether this still happens, but the very last element of the service was always someone coming to that front little speaker's desk and either saying a few words or closing out the service in some way. And so at the very last minute, he said, well, why don't you just learn this tune? And that's how we could close the service. And I never got written music for it. I obviously learned it the way I did everything else, which was just by rote. But it turns out that in fact, it was a song he had written. He did not tell me that. And it's in volume 2 of Zamru Lo. And you want me to sing the whole thing? Yeah. It's not that long. Okay.
You don't have to. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to.
Okay, no, I will, but I have to find out the pitch to start on. Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratecha b'finu u'b'fi amcha Beit Yisrael. V'nihya anachnu kulanu yodei shmecha. V'yihya anachnu kulanu Yodei Shmecha V'lomdei Toratecha Allah. I shouldn't be reading this. Li'amo Yisrael. Amen. So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I will just read what Dr. Rabbi Kaplan had to say about Nathanson. Nathanson captivated us by his renditions and his sweet singing voice. From the very beginning, he was being able to wow the congregation into chanting the service along with him. We are not reduced to a passive audience listening to a musical performance, but we join in lustily with all the verb, but without the antiques of a Hasidic service. So there you go in a nutshell, Kaplan's vision of the aesthetics of the synagogue, which basically means an active participation of the congregation. We will play for you 2 songs by Nathanson that he recorded here in New York. Yes, please.
About Zamru Lo. It's interesting, Paula, that you bring that up. So Nathanson, he had the beautiful collection of songs that you showed us first, and then he put together this 3-book series, Zamru Lo. He's really the first one to do that that was so comprehensive of Shabbat melodies, Erev and Shachrit, and then Shalosh Regalim, the festival melodies, and then he did another one for high holiday melodies. And it wasn't only his melodies. He compiled basically the American Jewish popular music that folks did in synagogue, and then published it for new cantors or other shlichei tzibor who were coming up and needed the music. And so it's interesting, when I got here in 2009, and we come to Shabbat Shira, and Rabbi Strassfeld says, you're going to do the Shira, right? Shirat Hayam. And I said, yes. And he said, well, what about the melody in between the traditional song? And I said, oh, yeah. Oh, I guess there needs to be a special melody for that, not just the traditional Torah melody they use for the whole rest of the Torah. And so before I wanted to reach out to my predecessor, I said, well, let's see. Nathanson wrote these huge, this huge compilation of music. Let's see if he put it in Zamrulo. And sure enough, he had composed his own melody to use on the text of Shirat Hayam in between. So you have Ashir Adonai Ki Gaoga Sus V'Rochvo Rama Hayam. That's the traditional melody that everybody knows. Then he created da 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 da. He wrote that melody and included it in Zamrulo, so that you had something interesting to listen to for this very particular and special parsha. So that
and he gives several melodies for each text.
Yes, it's just so comprehensive.
Yeah, and the melodies are mostly for the congregation. It's not a cantorial anthology that cantors used to produce, but is the melodies for the congregational participation. But the two songs we want to hear from Nathanson are songs from the land of Israel. And this is a concept. This is what usually people call Israeli songs, but Israeli songs exist before Israel exists. So we call that songs of the land of Israel, Shirei Eretz Israel. And Nathanson, as I said before, he brought this repertoire with him. Mostly, as Paula says, he brought that in his head orally. Eventually, he wrote it down in musical notation. Many of these songs were known only orally, and they were printed for the first time here in America, not in Israel, in music notation. So this is an interesting phenomenon. These two songs appeared in 178 RPM record. These are the old small records, if you have ever seen them, where you only have 3 minutes in each side, published by Metro Record Company, which is a local company here from New York City that specializes in Jewish materials. And Nathanson is introduced in this record as one of the most eminent singers, Jewish singers of New York. I don't know who told the record company about that, but they wrote it down. And certainly enough, how is the record called? The record is called Sing Out Palestine, which of course today it sounds a little bit strange for two very Zionist songs. Eventually the same record was republished a few years after as a 33 long play, as a big long play, and there it's called Sing Out Israel because the new edition is from 1950, 2 years after the establishment of Israel. Now, these two songs are very interesting. One is about Jerusalem and one is about Tel Aviv. So we have Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, which until today are presented as two different poles of Israeli society. Now, the first song about Jerusalem that we're going to hear is called Mi'al Pisgat Arat Sofim. This is from the heights of Arat Sofim, of Mount Scopus, which of course has related to my university, which is situated in this mount. This is a very interesting song. By the way, both songs, the song about Jerusalem and about Tel Aviv, were written by the same poet, Emanuela Rossi. And this is interesting that the two poems by the same poet were composed and performed by Nathanson here in New York back to back. The song about Jerusalem is very interesting. Today it's still sung, and even in synagogues I heard that. Sometimes the melody is adapted to the tefillah, okay, when Jerusalem is mentioned. However, the melody, the original song has 4 stanzas, and the middle 2 stanzas speaks about the ethnic tensions between different Jewish communities in Jerusalem. Those 2 stanzas that deal with ethnic tensions in the pre-Israeli society were wiped out. And we are left with the beginning and the end of the poem that sings the praises of Jerusalem. So that's something very interesting in terms of how songs are canonized. So we'll hear this. I think we'll hear them back to back, one after the other, yes. The second one is about Tel Aviv. By the way, the melody of the song about Jerusalem was taken from an Yiddish folk song. So you have the adaptation of the Yiddish musical tradition into the Hebrew culture, okay, against the grain of what is called Shlilat HaGalut, the negation of the diaspora, which was the negation of Israel, of Yiddish. So Yiddish was neglected, but not the music of Yiddish, which found its way into Israeli culture. Into many Israeli songs are based on melodies from the Yiddish folk song. However, one of my students discovered that the Yiddish song is based on an aria from a Polish national opera from the mid-19th century. So here you have a Polish opera transformed into an Yiddish song, transformed into a song about Jerusalem. The song about Tel Aviv sings the praises of this young city, the white city of Tel Aviv. You know, even the policeman is a Jew, okay? What an amazing phenomenon. And the music, again, is adopted from another culture. Which culture? The other supplier of melodies through Hebrew songs, Arab Palestinian folklore. So you have here a song praising the new city of Tel Aviv, sung to an Arabic folk tune from Palestine, which again, if you have a little bit of sense for history, is very interesting paradoxes. And Nathanson sings the songs, particularly the song about Tel Aviv. He knows the Arab original, okay? He can hear, he sings that with a very heavy Oriental Sephardic pronunciation in Hebrew, really exaggerating the guttural letters. So this is why his performance is so interesting. And he's accompanied finally by Abe Elstein, one of the great Jewish musicians from New York. So here we have a jewel of Jewish, Israeli, American culture produced here in New York. Let's hear both songs, please.
Shalom lach Yerushalayim, me'al pisgat haratofim, eshtachav lach apayim, me'yad dorot halamti alayich, lizkot lirot beyor panayich, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Hayir yichadnayich livrech, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, mechorevotayich evednech, meyal pisgat haratofim, shalom lach Yerushalayim, alvei golim miktot kol tevel, nosim elayich enayim, be'alfei brachot hayiberucha, mikdash melech ir melucha, Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, ani lo azuz mipo, המשיח יבוא. תל אביב היא עיר יהודית שכולה ישראל. יהודים בה גם מעשיר וגם הפועל. טוב לחיות בתל אביב בארץ ישראל. טוב לחיות ולחכות לביאת הגואל. שבחו והודו לתל אביב, חביבה לנו מכל חביב, אושר עונג מסביב. בתל אביב הבתים לבנים כמו חלב, וברחובות יש אוטובוס ואפשר גם לשבת עליו, ובכל פינה עומד שוטר יהודי בן ברית, והוא עומד והוא מראה והוא מדבר עברית. שבחו והודו לתל אביב, חביבה לנו מכל חביב, אושר עונג מסביב. ביום שבת הכל סגור ואין חנות פתוחה, ברחובות שמחה וששון ושבת מנוחה. מזמרים ורוקדים וקוראים עיתון, בערב הולכים לתיאטרון. שבחו והודו לתל אביב, חביבה לנו מכל חביב, אושר עונג מסביב.
Also the genial accompaniment of Eisenstein, who is following the singer. He doesn't know where he's going, and he's always after him, which is amazing. Also, you know, in the Talmud is written that you have to bring any information that you got from someone else and mention the name. So the fact that the song about Jerusalem comes from a Polish opera is from my student Talila Eliram. I didn't mention her name, so I want to mention. We will finish here with Nathanson. We could, as I said, we wanted an entire event about him, and perhaps we will in the future do, but we cannot finish without mentioning his utmost legacy for music of the Jewish people, something that you can hear all around the Jewish world today, from China to San Francisco, and north and south, and this is the Birkat Hamazon that was published in the mid-50s with all the music. Here, Nathanson again show his amazing sense for communal singing, but combined also with his knowledge. What he did, he pasted together many old traditions of different parts, and he made it into one piece that was published in the mid-50s. Now, we will move very quickly and shortly, regretfully, because of lack of time. Yes? Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, I have to keep them because they are very valuable. Yeah, Now,
we're going to have time.
yeah,
at
we
the-
will have time,
at the end for
immediately
folks
at the end.
who
We
want-
will left time for all the participants to. It's up to you.
Wendy. Yes, so Wendy, if I didn't realize you can't stay. Do you want to come up for just a quick? Yes. So this is Wendy Taylor. This is Cantor Nathanson's
Thank you so much.
granddaughter. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you. My saying was a nightmare. This is, I just wanted to show you this. I found his book of, yeah. And that is my most fondest memory of him, just the penmanship and the, yes it is. And if anybody wants it, copies, please email me, call me.
What is written in there? What music is written in there? Is it just compositions?
It's songs.
He just, wow,
I'd
amazing.
like to say this
Oh,
very quickly, please. Thank you so much. Thank you for the honor.
yeah, Wendy, just make sure you use the microphone. We have a lot of folks at home.
I'm sorry, and I
who-
appreciate this so very much.
Yes.
Thank you for this honor. Our grandfather had the neshama of an angel, the modesty and humility of a butterfly, the diction of a morning dove, the talent and cantillation of the brightest star. His music in particular, Hava Nagila, has no boundaries. Its song of joy rings a melodic tune which endows unity across our world, and a gun to celebrate the mitzvah which we all share, the same sky, the love in our souls. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much. I'm glad
Thank
you're
you
able to
so
make it.
So, to realize the aesthetic ideal of having a renewal of art music in the synagogue, you not only need an excelling cantor and composers, but you need a good choir. And it took a while, apparently, until a good choir, actually one of the best synagogue choirs, was established in this shul. And there are two conductors that we're going to mention briefly that are the ones who really established this tradition here. The first one is Nehemiah, his name in Hebrew, Nehemiah Vinover, a towering figure in Jewish music history. Again, a man that we could dedicate an entire evening only to him. I would just say that he came from a real Hasidic family. He's the grandson of a very important the Rabbi of Burka, so he had his pedigree. He was born into this Hasidic society. However, as many individuals from very Orthodox families in Europe, he became enlightened by German culture, and he went to study music in Germany to become in Germany one of the most distinguished Jewish musicians and choral directors. His famous choir, the Nigun Choir, or eventually was called the Vinover Singers, toured throughout Europe, even after the Nazis came to power. The choir existed until 1938. At that time, of course, the life in Germany was impossible, and Vinover had the good luck of arriving here to America and save his life. Here in America, he became also a prominent scholar. His Anthology of Jewish Music, published here in the 1950s in New York, is an important document of European Jewish culture that Vinover had in his memory. And among his other activities, he became the conductor of the AJS, SAJ choral, synagogue choral community choir. And we have a recording by him, okay? I won't say more because simply Vinover deserves an entire evening. Perhaps, Michael, with the Jewish Music Forum, we can do something dedicated to Wienerver. And I am proud to be the head of the Jewish Music Research Center because we are the recipients of Wienerver's legacy at the National Library of Israel. And we published the second unpublished volume of Hasidic music published by the Jewish Music Research Center in 1985. One of our most lavish publications, I have to say. The music by Wienerver, Hasidic music by Wienerver. We will hear the recording, please.
Yes, this is Adon Olam.
Adon Olam,
I think he wrote the Adon Olam and not just conducting it.
Okay.
Is that correct?
You couldn't say that he's what Rabbi Kaplan would think is a mixture of continuity of Jewish tradition, but innovation and renovation and reinforcement according to contemporary music. So an amazing, I would say, a quality of choral singing by all means. One point that is important to remember is that choirs usually cost money. And the issue of the cost of the choir was a great issue in the board of SAJ for all the years that Winover was the conductor. And,
Nothing's changed.
What? Yeah, and the main defender of the choir was Rabbi Eisenstein. He didn't want the level of the choir to be cut down because of budgetary considerations. And we have the protocols, but eventually Winover left the congregation. The congregation couldn't afford him. He came to Israel, where he spent the rest of his life as a choral conductor, very much appreciated. Actually, he established the Israeli National Choir. So he was a very important figure there. The successor of Winover was a person from a new generation, Dr. Tzipora Yochsberger, who was born in Germany in 1920. Again, another Eretz Israeli story. Tzipora, as a young woman, saves herself from a very faithful destiny that her parents suffered by coming to Eretz Israel. 1939, she moves to Israel to study at the conservatory in Jerusalem. Her parents stay behind her, and they perished in the Holocaust. So Tzipora became a music teacher, and if I'm speaking about her in first person, is because I knew her very well in person. She, after graduating in Jerusalem, she, to make the long story short, she found herself coming here to America for a certain period of time. She saw what she perceived as a very bad shape of American Judaism vis-a-vis Jewish identity, and she said music can fix that. She believed in the power of music to keep Jewish tradition and Jewish identity alive in this country. So she became an educator here. Very soon, she established what was called then the Hebrew Arts School, which is not far away from here, next to Lincoln Center. I think today has a different name.
It's the Kaufman Center.
Yes, yes. And an amazing enterprise in order to create a new generation of Jews in America educated into Judaism through music. What a concept. And at the same time, to make a living, she became the conductor of the SAJ choir. You saw already a few pictures in the videos, and we're going to hear a piece by Tzipora. Tzipora was also a composer, and after she retired from the Hebrew Art School, she made Aliyah. She returned to Israel again in 1984. And that's when I met her. I came back from my PhD studies here in America, and she established in Israel an association called, I think, Musica Shel Israel, the music of Israel, again, now to educate the Israelis into Jewish culture through music. What a concept, too. And so you can watch online, if you have time, in video. She produced, among other things, and I was her advisor, 10 videos called The Music of Music and Its People, okay, about the history of Jewish music, 10 videos that are free online, produced by Tzipora Yochsberger. So we are going to hear one of her pieces, performed by the Encore choir in Israel, the children's choir. Please, let's hear Tzipora's music. Thank you.
If I could say something
Yes,
about,
please.
about the Hebrew Arts Academy, that eventually became the Kaufman Center that you know in the West 60s. There's Merkin Concert Hall, I believe, is in there. And it still has Jewish roots. They have a Jewish choir there, Hanashir. Ben Gruder is the conductor there, has been there for many years. And I believe the special music school, which is a public school available for all New York City children, is based there as well. So they have the Hebrew component, the Jewish component, and the children's educational component still there, and it's really expanded, and it's really amazing to see that it all started really with her.
In one of her latest interviews, a few years ago, before she died, she said, I founded this school with 17 kids, and now there are 2,000 in the school. So it's an amazing achievement. We will dedicate the very last segment of this afternoon to arguably the daughter of this movement, I would say the daughter of this synagogue, Judith Kaplan Eisenstein, who happened to be not only a very distinguished Jewish musician, but also a musicologist like me, so I feel like she is my colleague in a way, even though I never met her in person. And to speak about her, I will defer to Paula. Paula, if you're there again, to speak, to say a few words about your auntie. Please.
Yes, if you can unmute.
Yeah, I think we're unmuted now.
Yeah.
Let's see, where should I start? Judith was really the most incredibly talented person. I had no real sense of how talented she was until I started a project about almost a year ago of trying to see if AR Editions would reprint one or more of the cantatas that Judith and Ira Eisenstein wrote and that were first performed at the SAJ for the graduation of the, it was kids who had finished bar and bat mitzvah training and become bar bat mitzvah, and then went on to study further. And then there was kind of a graduation ceremony, and the cantatas were composed for that occasion. They're a fascinating group of works. I'm hoping, I have proposed to AR Editions that they might want to reprint at least one, if not all, 7 cantatas. 5 were written by Judith and Ira. I think my sense is that he did the text and she did the music. And then there were 2 that she did both text and music for that were published later. Judith was, I had no understanding of how talented a person Judith was because, she's my aunt. So I can tell you, I can tell you a couple of stories about her. One was that when Miriam, her older daughter, and I we must have been, I think we were pre-bat mitzvah, and we took one of the cantatas and we sat down at the grand piano in the Eisenstein living room, and we went to town on it. We absolutely murdered it. We played, we laughed hysterically. We skipped things. We couldn't stop laughing. So we would just fake whatever we were supposed to be playing. And I kept thinking Judith is going to walk in here and have a hissy fit because she had a very short temper. She never said a word. And later on, I thought probably what her reaction was we were doing something musical, and it didn't matter how rough we were being with her creation. The important thing was that we were doing something musical. So that's one story I have of her. there's an awful, I mean, I had no idea what a prodigy she was until I started writing about her and read some of what she herself had written, and then read some of her father, Rabbi Kaplan's stories about her. I mean, she was really just, she was a child prodigy. She really was. And anyway, ask me questions, Edwin. Ask me specifics, and I'll try to answer them.
I think that the best will be at this point just to listen
to
one of those cantatas, perhaps the most famous of them towards the end of our event. What is Torah? It's a masterpiece, in my opinion, and a very interesting composition that still nobody has analyzed as to the array of sources that Judith recruited for this piece. Okay, this is a string.
I think that's one of the things that we hope to do in READ, if our publisher accepts the idea of reprinting these. We would go to town. My colleague is a musicologist and composer himself, and I think this is something that we would tackle.
Yes.
She packed. Yes, there are a number of cantatas that were performed at SAJ. I'm assuming all of them at some point. The most recent cantata that was performed here, it was before I got here. I was here in 2009, so it must have been maybe in the early 2000s, and it was What is Torah that was performed. So I want to also add, she packed so much into What is Torah. That's the only one that I'm really familiar with, and you're going to hear it. There are really 4 sections, and the whole work is 17 minutes. So we're not going to listen to the whole thing. I will have a link available if you'd like to listen to the whole thing afterwards. This is the second 2 pieces. And what she and Ira attempt to do is answer what is Torah, and it's approached from many different angles, because Torah has so many different roles in the Jewish people's life and culture and history. So we are going to hear the last 2, and you are going to hear how much they pack into it, both in the text, in the lyrics, and in the music that is contained in there.
Absolutely.
Graduation from my Hebrew school at an Orthodox synagogue, we sang at the Bima, What is Torah?
Yes, and this cantata and many other cantatas were performed not just at SAJ, but really nationally, and it's not surprising how far-reaching. So we will have an audience talk back at the end, but we want to get to listening.
Yeah. Well, we promise you that this will be just the beginning of this discussion. We will continue. No, listen.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. So let's listen to the video.
Funny picture of Judith.
What is Torah?
Torah is a scroll, some rolls of parchment with writing on it. Sometimes it is wrapped in a simple cloak. Sometimes it is bedecked with jewels and breastplate and a solemn crown. The scroll is proudly held aloft for all the congregation to see.
The scroll is carried around the crowded synagogue for little children to kiss, for grandmothers to weep over, for straight young men to salute. It is a flag leading an army of peace. Dance with it, sing with it, and on Simchat Torah clasp it in your arms, whirl in an ecstasy of joy, singing, shouting, dancing, dancing. It is a scroll.
When the mad sadistic foe throw firebrands into the sacred place, and flames roar and crackle, we wrap the talit about our faces, crash into the blazing sanctuary, rip the doors of the ark apart, and take the scroll into our scorched arms, to our burning breasts. All else may perish. All else is naught. The scroll is saved, and Israel bears it to a new abode. What is Torah?
It is a small room with many little children and a man who teaches them.
Komets Alefo, Komets Baseball, Komets Gimmelgo.
Yes, my little ones, the holy letters, they flew to heaven when the temple was destroyed.
The letters flew to heaven?
Yes, floated in the air. The letters floated in the air. Again, little ones, again.
Komets Alefo, Komets Baseball, Komets Gimmelgo.
Learn the letters well, for they are drenched with tears. They're carved out of the flesh of martyrs. Learn them well.
Komets Alefo, Komets Baseball, Komets Gimmelgo.
Torah is a dim Bet HaMidrash, a lone Kabbalist in mystic contemplation, searches out the hidden thought. He gropes for the infinite, the Ein Sof, the ineffable one, striving, straining to reach out, to grasp the hem of the garment, the edge of the divine throne, to wrest the secret of the Almighty. Torah. It is the modest study of the Rav, who sways in slow and pious rhythm over the Talmud. He is the judge, the scholar. He is humble and calm and wise.
Torah. It is the mother crooning over her babe, soothing him to sleep. Grow to learn Torah. It is the best of all the worldly goods that you may have.
Torah. It is the prayer of every Jew that learning may abide with him and with his children after him, that the word of God may not depart.
That the spirit of knowledge may blossom and flourish.
What is Torah?
Torah is the land, the soil, Mother Earth, Eretz Israel, the land that binds Israel to God, the land that Moses could not see except from afar, from the heights of Nebo, the land flowing with milk and honey.
The land of Joshua, Samson, David, is the land that empires covet. Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander, Titus.
It is the temple site in ruins as Jeremiah sighs over the glory that is departed. A small band of exiles sitting by the river's edge in Babylon without a song on their lips.
It is fiery Ezekiel, stirred by the vision of a valley filled with dry bones which come to life again. It is the marching song of triumphant exiles returning, returning. It is the hushed throng watching the foundations of the new temple laid. It is the Maccabean guerrillas. It is a flaming temple again, and the scholars of Yavna gathering to study.
It is the long, long exile, filled with dreams of Yerushalayim Shel Ma'ala. What is Torah?
It is the Great Awakening. It is Theodor Herzl.
The Zionist Congress, Tel Aviv,
Industry.
University,
En Harod.
Nehalal,
Keren Kayemet. Chalutzim, Chalutzim.
Torah awake, a steady limb.
is Torah?
The Torah is Israel's gift to humanity, the inspiration of poets, statesmen, religious leaders, scholars. The Torah is the impress of Israel upon the civilization of mankind. The Torah is the cornerstone of the great Western religions. The Torah is the inspiration of modern ideals of freedom, equality, justice. It is Franklin Delano Roosevelt saying, "We are inspired by a faith which goes back all the years to the first chapter of Genesis. God created man in his own image. We on our side are striving to be true to that divine heritage. We are fighting as our fathers fought to uphold the doctrine that all men are equal in the sight of God.
With brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
What is Torah?
Torah is the creation of the world.
Torah is the Sabbath.
Torah is the pastoral life.
Torah is the epic of Egyptian slavery and emancipation.
Torah is ethical idealism.
Torah is a parchment scroll.
Torah is a study room, a lullaby, a prayer.
Torah is a land.
Torah is a light unto the nations.
We thank thee, O our God, for the Torah, which thou gavest unto thy people. May we ever cherish it, guard it, learn it, perfect it, and it. For it is our life, and the length of our days.
Thank you. We have met 5 Jews of the 20th century. Edelson, Nathanson, Wienerver, Jochsberger, and Kaplan Eisenstein. The 5 of them live in a century of turmoil. They live between Europe, the land of Israel, and America. And the 5 of them believed that music is the key to Jewishness. And they invested their lives in education, in creativity, and in performance, the 5 of them. Remember that, and you had the honor of belonging to a congregation that hosted all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Serrusi. We have a couple of minutes where if folks either online or here want to share a very, very brief story that you may have from interacting with any of these 5 people. I'm not sure if Miriam Eisenstein is on, if you want to add something. Yes, if you can spotlight her and unmute her. Would love to hear if Mim has anything to add. I'm sure she has something to add.
It was a wonderful program, and it could go on forever. I just wanted to add, Dr. Serrusi mentioned the Birkat Hamazon melody. And what a lot of SAJ-niks don't remember is that we use that melody for the Amida. Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. In fact, when I first went to Camp Ramah and heard the tune they used for Birkat Hamazon, which we did not use at home, it's awfully familiar. What is that melody? And it wasn't until my parents visited and I said, what is that melody and why do I know it? They said, well, you know it because we do it for the Amida. It was very strange because I think we're the only people who did that. But I'm not going to go on and on. Just that, and we skipped Halax, the period between Chemio Wienerver and Tzipora Jochsberger, largely, first of all, he was not much of a Jewish music anything. My mother taught him what to do, and he did it, but he did it extremely well and composed some beautiful things, but it's been lost. We cannot find his music. And so that's why we didn't, put him into the program. If we ever find the music, if anyone still has it, if anyone has it, in their closet somewhere, please come up with it so we can honor
Got
Hal.
Hal Axe, correct?
Harold Axe, yes, Hal.
Harold Axe, yeah.
Yes.
And he was a choir conductor in between Vinever and Sipor Yaxberger. Yes. Say that again? Hal Axe's daughter is still alive, Catherine. Does she have?
She doesn't. We tried to
She's
get
a
it.
professional singer in New York, ma'am. So
She doesn't have it. I've talked to Kathy Axe. She does not have the music. We've looked for it.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, ma'am. I know you might have other things. I don't know if
No,
there's
just-
anyone.
I want to thank Paula. I forgot. Paula, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paula. Is there anyone in the room? David, you wanted to add something? Okay.
I have to get used to doing this again.
Thank you. Hi. I'm wondering what you think of this. When Moshe Nathanson retired from the SAJ, I don't remember the year, but I'm sorry? Oh, closer? Is this better? Okay. There was a big celebration here in the sanctuary, and one of the things that we learned, and I heard this for the first time, was that Moshe Nathanson was involved in the writing of Hava Nagila. Did you know that?
He very much knows
This
that.
is one of the greatest controversies of the Jewish world. So, do you want to talk about that now, or should we take a couple questions?
Edwin wrote a great article about it, and we explained it in the program yesterday. You wrote an article for Tablet magazine, and there's a link online that you can find where he goes into the history of Hava Nagila and whether it was Moshe Nathanson or if it was Edelson, because both were sort of claimed to it. But yes, we didn't want to focus today on that because that happened in Israel and sort of before their time here. But it is important to.
Have you seen the movie? Yeah.
Yes.
Did you like the movie?
Oh, lovely. Great. Wonderful. Yeah, we were just, sorry, I'm just going to say this into the microphone for folks at home because they can't, unless you're speaking into the microphone, they can't hear. So someone's just sharing, that's okay. They're sharing their time as a bar mitzvah student of Moshe Nathanson. So thank you so much for sharing that. Also, there is a movie about Hava Nagila if folks want to watch it. That's more about its cultural phenomenon and less about the history of its genesis. Yeah, Myra.
First of all, this was such an amazing afternoon, thank you, but I did want to supplement what Sylvia said, which was that when we did the What is Torah, it was Florence Cohn, who grew up here and is a member, still a member, but who was determined to put it on. She still annoyed at me, even though I can't sing, that I didn't participate in it. But she did. She was the one who did that. I must be 15 years ago, I guess.
Then the recording that you hear, that was professionally done with a professional narrators and singers and choirs, but it really is made for any congregation to be able to do it.
Yes.
Yes, Matthew.
My Hebrew education was during the World War II years and afterwards. It was very much, and what happened at my Talmud Torah, which was 10 hours a week, it was a substantial education, was we had a leader from Israel, and he brought in much of what there was to have. And I had a teacher who sadly lost his fingers when he was in prison, when he was in Germany, when he was in Europe. He had only a thumb. But he was a fine teacher. And I learned to do the Musaf. I learned a good deal to do, and I was a singer. I am a singer. And was the first youngster to do Musaf in the whole congregation. It wasn't in the children's thing, and I went on to learn more. And you're right, it was surprising. My father was a musician, not professionally, although he had had a small choir when he was young, and he came here and he had a small choir. But so I got an education which was very, and we were all singers, and it was based, and I think you make it very clear that this making the Jewish tradition live in so many ways was through the music, which we all could do. At least we all used to be able to do, because they don't teach people to sing anymore. Not here, not in America, unfortunately. And so many people are listeners, they don't sing.
I think the music has changed a bit in how we access it, both in training and what we do in the congregation. So is there, yes, thank you. Yeah, maybe one person from online, because we are running a little bit late, and I do have 2 very short songs to share, and I don't want to take too much time. So if there's folks, maybe if you can, Nicole, can you put it on gallery view? We can see if folks can raise their hand either through Zoom or just in your screen. We can see if anyone at home wants to add anything. Oh, there's Ann Eisenstein as well, Miriam's sister. Wonderful group of people at home. There's Miriam. And Hester. Okay, so it doesn't look like George Dreesen is raising his hand. I don't know which one he is. If you can maybe,
He's a rabbi.
if you can,
Let's go to a different page.
if you can find him and spotlight him. Thank you, Noah. Yes, please unmute.
I'm a rabbi because of Judy and Ira, of course, and especially Judy because of her music, and a singer to the extent I was because of Hal Axe, who taught us if you can talk, you can sing. And he made it happen for so many people who you thought were one Johnny run notes and that sort of thing. But in chorus, we used to be able to sing out lustily, on key, on the beat, and he ran through the musical repertoire, not only Jewish, but Christian as well. And he took away my fear of churches because we sang there as well as in synagogues. And it was an interracial choir that he led that I was a part of and an officer in. And we used to go around to the synagogues and churches to illustrate the point that blacks and whites could make music together, beautiful music. He was an extraordinarily fine teacher, and I'm sorry that his contribution cannot be better memorialized because he did not write his own music.
Thank you for adding that. We appreciate that because it's important to honor and lift up his legacy and his contributions as well. Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to conclude with 2 songs. So Judith Kaplan Eisenstein was musicologist and really an educator, and compiled a number of books for children to sing, both in children's choirs, but primarily for kids to sing. And they were educational songs. So the songs that I'm going to present, they're 2 Perm songs. Sorry? This is Judith Kaplan Eisenstein. So a lot of the music in her books were from other folks, but she also wrote a fair number of melodies, and she wrote a lot of translations of originally Hebrew text, or she wrote her own words to sort of fulfill a particular educational purpose. So these 2 Perm songs, the first one is called Song of the Perm Spieler, and if you can put up the slides, this is a Hasidic melody that she took. We've done it a few times here, so perhaps it's familiar. And she wrote her own lyrics just to sort of add to the levity and joy of Purim, and she wants the kids to sense that and then learn a little bit about like what to look for and what to know about this holiday. And you can't see it, but in the book she has an instruction. It says, for the kids, as you're singing the song, try to be a real Perm Spieler. Entertain your schoolmates by acting out the story. Go from room to room with your play and your songs. And when you come home, you can entertain your family too with a Perm play. So she's constantly thinking about how can we educate kids and bring them in, whether it's through music or through suggestions of play, to bring them into their Judaism and have them feel a sense of ownership. So this is Song of the Perm Spieler. Come and see our Purim Spiel, mighty wonders will reveal of Purim, of happy Purim day. Get your groggers ready now, while the actors take a bow and put on their masks in colors bright and gay. See the Megillah slowly unwinding, and out comes Esther dancing with the king. Haman the villain and Mordechai the hero, each one has his turn to dance and sing. Come and see our Purim Spiel, mighty wonders will reveal of Purim, of happy Purim day. Get your groggers ready now, while the actors take a bow and put on their masks in colors bright and gay, and put on their masks in colors bright and gay, and put on their masks in colors bright and gay. This second song is called Mischak Purim. It's all in Hebrew, and the goal here is to really present to kids the 3 main elements of Purim. We have the groggers, the Rashan, and the Rashanim, the Rashanot, the Ozen Haman, which is the Hebrew term for Homintashin. Ozen Haman are the ears, right? So the shape of the cookies. And then Mishloach Manot, which are the gifts that you bring on Purim to send to people to spread joy around to everyone. Very, very simple lyrics. The first one, here's the grogger making noise, so I make noise on Purim day. And then the refrain is, Purim is coming, everyone rejoice. So that's the first verse. The second verse, here are Haman's ears, the Homintashin, the Ozen Haman. You eat me, it's in the first person, you eat me on Purim day. And the last verse, here is the Mashloach Manot, the gifts we send. I, meaning the gift, I am going to a small child. And then we say Purim ba, Purim ba. So I want to teach you this very short refrain. If you want to listen to it once, we have the words up on the top there. Purim ba, hakol, hakol, semechim. So Purim is coming, everyone rejoice. So I hope you can join me in singing this refrain. So I'm going to teach it to you first. Purim ba, Purim hakol hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Wanna try it? Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Wonderful. So we try it again with the full piano accompaniment. Ready? Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Hineni harashan rashan ra 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 ra, kacha kacha roesh ani beyom hapurim. Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Hineni ozen haman atem ochelim oti beyom hapurim. Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Hineni mishloach manot, la 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 la, ani holech leילד katan beyom hapurim. Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. One more time. Purim ba, hakol semechim, Purim ba, hakol semechim. Thank you to our pianist, Alex Yagupski. Much gratitude to Dr. Edwin Serrusi and Dr. Paula Eisenstein Baker online. I want to make sure I get everyone else to thank. I don't want to miss anyone. Special thank you to Barbara Schmutzler, who helped compile all these amazing photographs and tracking down recordings. Some of these recordings were not easy to find, so really appreciate everything that Barbara did. To Samantha Bordador, who put these videos together with the music and the accompanying photographs. And I want to thank also Rabbi Lauren Graybell Herman for her support, as well as others on the 100th anniversary committee, Nancy Ludmerer and Allison and Abe and Donna for their work in putting this whole thing together. So I hope you can join us for our future events. We have a special SOJAC event in February connected to the 100th anniversary of the Bat Mitzvah in March, and many other amazing events in June, and then after the summer in the fall as well. Thank you so much for coming out today through the snow and the slush and the cold. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And again, all the videos that you saw will be available online as well. Thank you again. Have a good afternoon.